Hi, folks. Thinking Slow here. A quick video for the 10th of November 2023. This is the day before this melee that we're expecting to take place on Saturday, the 11th of November in London. And this is my second warning about not going. And if you've seen the previous video, it's probably just below this one, but it goes through some of the background. The reason I'm doing a quick follow-up is I have now the proof positive that you are being very badly manipulated, in the same way as we've been manipulated in other events like COVID and Ukraine, a massive wall of fake social media traffic generated by bots that are being managed to push divisive messages. And I'm looking at the pro-Israeli side, or I would say it's the pro-Zionist side. It's not the pro-Israeli side. I will show you those bots because those bots actually tell you that you're being manipulated, and they also tie in various talking heads into groups. And I think you can guess who the names of those talking heads are. But it's also interesting to see the links between Tice, Tommy Robinson, the Israeli Defense Force, David Eli, and all kinds of others. It's an interesting chart, so hang on for that. Now, the main thing I want to say is don't get bogged down into the pros and cons of the actual conflict. I don't think that's really necessarily relevant for everyone to get fixated with that, because what's really going on, and it's been going on for 3 years now, is the media political complex is setting this sort of agenda of continuous conflict, continuous war since 2020 now. We spent 2 years at war with the virus, then we spent 1.5 years at war with Russia. Now we're at war with Palestine and extremists, but that's their agenda. And as we get fixated with that agenda, off to the left here are the things that are actually going on that are really important, like the CBDC implementation, the carbon credits, the social credits, the endless chipping away at freedom of speech and freedom of association. That's the big stuff that's going to have an impact on you, me, and our children. That's the important stuff. Now, sitting here flinging insults at someone on Twitter about who did what in Gaza is not gonna it's achieve nothing. So I'm not gonna get into the actual ins and outs of this. I just want to focus on explaining to people that they're being manipulated. Now, what's really going on now is these guys we've been looking at, like the Murrays and the Tommy Robinsons. Um, they're doing three sort of things in parallel, I would say. What they're actually saying, what they're announcing is number three. Look, we've had enough of these immigrants into the UK that are not assimilated, and they've been taking liberties, they've been doing all kinds of bad things, and we need them removed from the UK, and we need immigration cut down massively. Um, Now, that's what they're saying, but what I think they're actually doing is they are inciting violence in number two, and that violence will end up creating, as I mentioned in the other video, all kinds of very unseemly photos and video clips which will harden attitudes and increase tensions. And they want those attitudes hardened because really the ultimate goal is to give the Israeli army, the IDF, carte blanche to go in and deal with Gaza, which right now it looks like essentially flattening completely the whole of Gaza and displacing the entire population. That seems to be, roughly speaking, what's going on without any regard to civilian casualties. And the way they're doing that, what they're doing is they're saying they're doing three, which is, removing unassimilated immigrants, which I think everybody can agree with. It's not too controversial that, you don't necessarily want to have your enemies sitting in your own country. And the rate of immigration now is out of control. So it's not a contentious question, number three. But what they're doing is actually they're riling people up to get engaged with number three, whereas actually their real aim is number one. Now, I think in the case of Douglas Murray, he only really cares about one because he doesn't even live in the UK. I mean, do you think he's going to be in Oldham or Tower Hamlets or anywhere else? This is irrelevant to him. He's never going to be there. He's an upper class person who will not be living in the UK. He's in a New York penthouse. So I don't really think he cares about three, to be honest. Now, in the case of Tommy Robinson, it's much more complicated because he could well care about three, but he also is very heavily influenced by number one. And that's what the followers of Tommy Robinson and the other guys who are close to Zionist movement, you need to understand, when you're following Tommy Robinson, you may be buying into three, but his objective is one. So just be careful with that. And then this is now the hard evidence that you're being manipulated on social media. I mean, I've been saying, and I think it's almost becoming obvious now, that mainstream media has been manipulating the population for decades, and it's becoming increasingly obvious now. The messages are so coordinated over COVID. I mean, it was ludicrous. Every newspaper in the UK parroted safe and effective until 2 years later they all start saying, well, maybe not. So, we've seen that coordination of the media. We've seen that any sort of alternative opinion is not allowed to be stated in any of those mainstream media outlets. But you're also being manipulated all the time through social media, and that's being done through bots. There are huge bot operations now amplifying pro-Israeli messages. And again, I don't mean pro-Israel, I mean pro-Zionist, because that's two very different things. And the Zionist messaging here, I mean, here's a bot that we looked at. It has about 7,500 tweets, almost all retweets, bar about 20 manual input tweets. So there are manual input tweets, which means there is someone behind this. And this someone could run 50 accounts, 100 accounts, 1,000 accounts, 10,000 accounts. It's hard to say. But this is automated because all of the interaction is automated. It's all retweets, no original content. It's about 1%, and no followers, even with 7,500 tweets. When I say no, I mean 64 followers, of which most of them are porn bots, so completely fake. And it's interesting, you can look at this account and you can build this map of who is this account amplifying at the moment. It's pretty interesting. So you have the Israeli Defense Force, which is obviously an official government account. You have this David Eli now, who's everywhere, who's uh, pushing out pro-Israeli messages. He's stuffing up my timeline. Yeah, I don't know how many tweets he's doing a day. It doesn't seem to affect his tweet count, but this is a very big, sort of noisy again, Zionist, I would say, more than pro-Israel account. And it's also looking at the sort of Mossad affiliated accounts, and it's amplifying. Here's Tommy Robinson. Here's Daubney, who's another one that's shouting, "Get down the cenotaph," sort them all out. Enough is enough, all that kind of thing. And then Richard Tice, and then bits of Talk TV. Now, Talk TV and this one, Visegrad, were big pushers of the Ukrainian war agenda. So these guys are just seamlessly moving from pushing Ukrainian pro-war stance to pushing sort of pro-Israeli in the Israeli-Palestine war. So this is all fake. It doesn't happen by accident. Someone has set this up deliberately, so that you're being manipulated to see these tweets as being significantly more popular than they are, and they always stay at the top of your timeline. Now, this account also amplifies Douglas Murray and Kissin and those other guys, but this is a smoking gun for evidence that you're being manipulated in that there's a certain group of people, although who appear completely disparate, they're actually pushing exactly the same message, and it's being fake and it's being falsely amplified. I mean, I don't know you can't really say who's amplifying it, but judging by what I saw in Ukraine, this will be maybe something attached to Israel Ministry of Foreign Affairs or Israel Ministry of Defense. So that's highly likely. It's not guaranteed. It could be an NGO, it could be something else, but that's a reasonable speculation. Now, the other thing that I wanted to say is that all these guys, particularly Tice and Douglas Murray, are sort of tub thumping, chest beating, based on British values. We must go to the cenotaph and protect British values. Now, when the British state attacked the citizens of the UK through coercive lockdowns, vaccine passports, vaccine mandates, compulsory testing, restricting your ability to travel, etc., etc. Where were these guys? Now, you'll see now the real people who protected and valued British values. Those are the guys in the truth movement who probably for 2 solid years, a lot of them and us have worked tirelessly to stop government oppression. Now, most of these talking heads were basically nowhere to be seen. Murray certainly was nowhere to be seen. And then these guys like Kissin and Tice did a couple of half-hearted tweets well after lockdowns were announced in March 2020. When the show is basically over, they'll come in and make a sort of half-baked effort at resistance. But the fact that they weren't there when it mattered tells you that they're not that bothered about British values. So it's all fake, all this chest thumping, tub thumping patriotism. Now it's a show, because when the Milgram experiment took place, they failed it. You should never forget that. And then, in particular, with Tice, as we've said before, if you really look at this photo, you think this is the guy that's going to take on the establishment, that's standing up for British values. I mean, you're absolutely crazy. He is an establishment geek, if ever there was one. He pushed every single pro Ukrainian war message. He pushed the vaccine. He told people, you must be vaccinated. Care home workers must be vaccinated. Must be vaccinated. Where's your British values there? You denied informed consent to 500,000 people. So forget this guy, forget those guys. They're not your friends. They're manipulating you into this melee in the cenotaph. And I think it's primarily to generate marketing collateral for them to push item number one, which is excusing Zionist overreaction in Gaza, including not differentiating between military and civilian targets. That's the real issue. And to have this tension inside the UK will help justify that overreaction. This is really what this is all about. And all of that bot traffic is supporting that message. It's manipulating you into believing that's a popular stance and their messages are popular. And it's also keeping their messages at the top of everybody's timeline. That's really what's going on. Um, and, also when Murray is talking about a solution of like, let's go to Harrow and identify this person, that of course is laughable, because the real reason that we have unassimilated immigrants in the UK is because guys like Murray and their neoconservative friends have been bombing, attacking, undermining, revolution, causing revolutions all around the world, but particularly in the last 20 years in Arab countries, which have been reduced to rubble for the main part. So, of course, you've created then an enormous flow of refugees that in every single different party has let more and more immigrants into the UK. You can't tell one from the other, Labour, Conservative, Liberal, it makes no difference. And actually, under the sort of Conservative Party, the number of immigrants coming into the UK now is over 600,000 a year. Now, that's a deliberate decision because you can control how many people you let into your country. That's a decision. So this stuff is not going on by accident. So, Douglas Murray's deep state friends have actually created a situation where, on the one hand, we've caused chaos in all of those Arab countries, and on the other hand, we've opened the borders. So, of course, we have a lot of people in the UK who are not happy with the UK, quite reasonably unhappy with the UK. So chasing our tails, looking for one guy in Harrow is ludicrous in the scope of having 600,000 people coming in a year. This is the problem. This, if Murray was genuine about fixing something, he wouldn't be chasing an Iranian guy in Harrow. He'd be looking at this system and talking to all his deep state friends and telling them to turn the spigots off big time. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands, not chasing an individual around the place. Um, and the idea that if you're pro a ceasefire makes you a Hamas supporter is also completely ludicrous. This has received no coverage at all in the UK press, but a UN resolution calling for a humanitarian truce, 120 countries in the world voted for that, with 14 against. And basically, the whole world said, yes, we want a humanitarian truce. was a non-binding resolution, but literally the whole world wants this. So are these sort of Richard Tice, Douglas Murray types telling the whole planet, essentially, apart from these 14 who voted against, that they're Hamas supporters? No, I mean, it's ludicrous. The humanitarian position is let's stop the killing. That's it. That's your starting and ending point. You don't get into value judgments. If there's a way to save lives, that's what you're going to do. But if your real objective is number one, which is allowing ethnic cleansing of Gaza, then of course you don't really want a ceasefire. That's the reality. So, again, these are memes, but they're true memes. The whole system is pushing you into this 24/7, pick a side, start throwing insults at the other side, go and have a melee at the cenotaph. This is not the way forward. This issue needs to be resolved, not but it won't be resolved by us throwing insults at each other. And all the meantime, in behind us is the introduction of CBDCs, carbon credits, the net zero plan, and all of those things. So I think with this part of the video, I just wanted to say, I hope I can convince you not to go to the cenotaph. If you're sort of borderline and you want to follow Tommy, just be aware he has other agenda items, number one, and he has close links with Zionist organizations. I don't think he makes a big secret of that. So if you're buying into I'm going there in order to reduce unassimilated immigration into the UK, you could actually be facilitating, number one, Zionist expansion into Gaza. So just be aware of that. And also, ignore all these Murray and Tice and all the rest of it. They do not care about British values because if they did, they would have stood up in 2020. Certainly, Murray was nowhere to be seen. Tice was kind of half-hearted, better than Murray, but nothing really in the scale of standing up against government oppression. Now that's the end of this part of the video, but having done quite a lot of homework, I did actually want to show you a little bit about the pros and cons of this issue. Although, as I said, it's not something for us to get into. I think we should leave it and get on with our enormous challenges back at home. But firstly, in terms of Hamas, Hamas is a terrorist organization. Its charter is despicable. There's no way any normal, sensible person could ever support Hamas, I don't think. So I'm all for having them arrested, having a war with Hamas. Fine, no problem. These are not good guys. They are very bad guys if you look at their stated objectives. It's also inhuman what they're doing. There's no tolerance. They actually have an aggressive agenda that nobody sensible can support. But on the other side, I just wanted to play you this quick clip from Rabbi Shapiro, and it's quite interesting what he has to say.
We were trained to do that. The Zionists created Zionism to extinguish Jewishness from the Jew. They wanted a militaristic Jew. They were ashamed of the way the Jews acted. They were shamed in the face of the anti-Semites and in the face of the world. They thought that the reason the anti-Semites hate the Jews is because they act like we do. Jews were not interested in culture or art. They were interested in Torah. There was no such thing as Jewish art. There's no such thing.
So I think you get the idea that Israel, even internally, is quite a complicated situation with a huge fight going on between the Orthodox Jews who believe in the Torah. That's how they see themselves, the definition of being Jewish, versus the Zionists, who are a state of Israel's definition of being a Jew, and also they are much more militarized and assertive, aggressive, whatever you want to like to call it. And there's endless tensions between those two groups. So even this is a very complicated conflict that I wouldn't want to get into, and I would suggest you don't waste too much time on it either. But it's just good to know that this is the Orthodox Jewish position on what's going on with the Zionist movement. The last thing also I wanted to say, the only thing I know about Jewish politics is Mr. Netanyahu injected the heck out of the vaccines. These characters came out dressed as a dog, a clown, something else, asking questions about what about the trials of the vaccine? surely they were inadequate. And this guy very smoothly lying, no, it's all fine, nothing to worry about, totally effective, totally safe. And the punchline of this was the DNA crazy conspiracy theory. Well, we know now for sure those vaccines are contaminated with DNA, and we've done work on that. So this whole pitch that Netanyahu made now is a complete lie. This video with ridiculing anyone asking questions. So I got a pretty simple rule in life that if someone goes out lying about one thing, they're pretty likely to lie about other stuff as well. So I have certainly no time for this guy, and just based on his approach to valid questions about the vaccine, all of which turned out to be correct, all of which he denied, and in every case he just ridiculed people asking those questions. So yeah, just wrapping up, I personally would like to stay focused on the stuff on the left, which is really important for me, my family, my friends. The stuff on the right is not going to make the difference for me. We've just seen this whole Ukraine crisis, so we've probably spent now 1.5 years fixated on Ukraine. Essentially, that's been lost now, and none of the time spent worrying about Ukraine will have any positive impact on any aspect of anybody's life, more or less, in the UK. So I would say go with that attitude, and within that framework, think about positive things that it's possible to do, like joining a political party in the UK, like Heritage, ADF. Stay away from these controlled opposition joke operations. Maybe jump into the Neil Oliver initiative to look at ways of getting direct democracy into the UK. Do local things, stand for local councils, get involved in um, Together Group or anything like that. That is going to be constructive, useful way to oppose the real enemy, which are the globalists. The globalists that are pulling the strings are the real enemies. It's not a bunch of leftists or young students or whatever waving Palestinian flags and singing from the river to the sea, which they probably don't understand, or at least some of them won't understand. That's not your enemy. And fighting with them is what these guys on the top want. They want us fighting while they get on with implementing their sort of crazy Great Reset agenda. I hope you found this interesting. Now, please help us on Patreon because I think we could do quite a lot of good through our research work. And anyone that's been following us knows that we warned you really early on about so many things to do with COVID, that the lockdowns were unnecessary, that the models were wrong, that the vaccine hasn't been properly tested. We flagged up very early on adverse events that weren't being reported anywhere. Still, even today, we reported on the impact on the motile count, which is sperm. Still, that's not been reported anywhere. That's going to be a limited hangout in 1 or 2 years' time. But we reported straight away this thing is having a tremendously bad negative impact on sperm count, and we exposed all of the negative impacts on ovaries and births in the trials on rats. So, we can disclose all that information, do that homework, but it needs to be a quid pro quo. We need more support. We have thousands of views and followers, but we have almost nothing on Patreon. So, if you've appreciated the work we've done, please spend the time to go over to Patreon because the main thing we're trying to do here is tell you the truth and expose the operations of the cabal, I guess you could call it, so that you're not suckered into doing something dangerous, which is bad for your health. So please take the time and go across to Patreon. Thank you. Bye.